Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Feudal Future podcast. I'm Marshall Toplansky.
I'm Joel Kotkin.
And today we are delighted to have two really inside and insightful viewers of Southern California and LA in particular to talk about the future of Los Angeles. Jill Stewart is going to join us. She is the managing editor, a former managing editor of LA Weekly and city editor of the LA Daily News. And Soledad Ursúa is a principal at Orinoco Equities and a member of the Venice Neighborhood Council. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi.
Well, let's start this off with a question Joel and I have been pondering for quite a while, which is we have a sense as longtime residents of Los Angeles that the city is kind of losing its mojo. You know, we used to have such an incredible sense of innovation and exciting new things happening all the time. Our sense is that things are just going downhill. Are we full of it, or are you feeling the same way?
That's a great question. I mean, I was near downtown recently, and the number of buildings that are half dark at night now because nobody's living in them. So really nice condos downtown. And I don't know if they're empty forever or if they're Airbnb or what's going on, but a lot of blackouts in the buildings. And, you know, you see big empty stores now. It's really kind of, it's creepy.
Yeah. Soledad, what's your sense of it?
So I grew up in Los Angeles. I'm a native Los Angelino, grew up in East LA. And I've been gone. I was in New York for about 9 years, and I moved back 6 years ago. I wanted to be closer to my family. I wanted to be closer to nice weather, and I wanted to get a dog and live at the beach. So I decided to move to Venice Beach. I got my dog. I was living the dream. And I started looking around, and it didn't seem like the same Los Angeles that I grew up with. And mind you, I was growing up in East Los Angeles during the 90s. The crime was very high back then. But what's happening now today is it's almost more dangerous because you have some very, mentally ill, violent individuals on the streets, and you could be a victim of crime at any time. So it's gone from something where, at least in the 90s, you knew that you were in a dangerous neighborhood. You could kind of, you knew to not be out at night. But what's happening now in Venice Beach and other areas with high homelessness is that, it's just random chance, where something could happen to you at any time of day. And I think that's what is really scary now.
Yeah, and I wonder the degree to which that sense that you have, both of you have, about kind of the hollowness here and the fear level having gone up has affected the numbers. Joel and I did a study recently of the movings in and out of the Los Angeles and Southern California area, and the city of LA, as you know, has lost several 100,000 people over the past decade. Large cities in general seem to have been shedding population, but LA seems to be, somehow shouldering more than its fair share of it. Joel, what's your sense of that?
Well, the worst statistic I saw was 750,000 people, young people, less today than there were in 2000. I mean, the LA I remember, this is more personal for me even than most of the topics. The LA I moved to in 1975 was incredibly vibrant, full of opportunity, and you never thought about it as a place where only a few really do well. There were all these immigrants coming, and they were working really hard. Like your family, so that starting from really at the bottom and moving their way up. That was the LA story. And I don't feel that anymore. I don't see it anything like I used to. Jill, you've been around for maybe not as long as me, but for a while. What do you think?
I got here in 1981, and there was some, street crime, and there was some gangs and all that stuff, but you could move into a neighborhood, really cheap neighborhood like Echo Park. That's one of the first places I lived. I lived in Hollywood, not too far from where the prostitutes, they were on my block actually. But it was, I don't know, it was less threatening crime. I can't quite put my finger on why. You could predict where the prostitutes and the gang members were, and then you could choose whether to walk through that or not. But now you can't choose. You don't know what's going to happen anywhere.
As you cover stories in the LA Daily News, well, are you kind of getting a sense of a different type of story emerging more frequently than used to happen? Like violent crime or thing. I don't want to lead the witness here, but are there certain kinds of, coverage or stories that seem to be more prevalent that would have been inconceivable, say, 20 years ago?
Well, something that I saw in our coverage of the city council election, it just ended, and some of the city officials too that were running. But it was that a lot of people are worried about all the homelessness and they want the city to do something about it. They passed a $1.2 billion big project plan that the taxpayers put their money into, and it didn't work. The city has failed. And so I think people they're worried that the fabric of their area is falling apart, and that the city has proved itself incapable of helping the homeless, housing the homeless. I mean, that's probably the number one issue in Los Angeles that everybody's talking about, even if they don't follow politics, is homelessness.
And the intractability of the problem. And it doesn't seem
I'd like to just ask Soledad, because I know you live with the homeless problem. And here's what I'm trying to understand. If people in LA are so pissed off, why are they electing a city council that's further in the direction that the city has been going in already, and is probably going to elect a very standard brand, left progressive as mayor? I don't know.
Just so you guys can visualize it, Venice Beach is a 3.5 mile, square, like it's just this beachside community. And today we have 2,000 unsheltered homeless individuals living on our streets. So we are second to that of Skid Row. We are Skid Row West. And I mean, it is highly dense. And, you ask, why would people keep doing that? I think that voters are just very disaffected. We do not trust our city, our representatives anymore. Just everything that they have told us has never really come to fruition. Jill, you talked about that $1.2 billion plan. That's a Prop HHH. Yeah. I mean, to us, we call it Prop ha ha ha, because it has not produced any results. And when you look at the funds, you're seeing that 30 to 60% of the costs, they're going to soft costs. So that's consultants, engineers, lawyers. The money is not going to housing. So there's something incredibly flawed with that. Controller Ron Galpern was someone who really sort of, shone a light on it, but it really hasn't gone far enough. But you see there's major corruption. The housing isn't getting built. So you have to ask, where's the money going? Because
and then at the end of the day, what does come out if they do build housing are units that cost $1 million each to actually construct, which seems to be counterproductive, especially if you're looking to house people who don't have the means. The thing that Jill, you came in 91, or in 81 rather. I came in 80. At the time that we arrived, Venice was kind of a dump. It was, I wouldn't call it Skid Row, but it was definitely not a place you'd want to hang out. And then all of a sudden, magically, as Santa Monica and Marina del Rey kind of moved up, that gap was closed, and somehow Venice gentrified and became a much more fashionable place. And now we see it devolving. Am I reading that wrong, or was it always? Did I just not choose to see the seedier side that was there?
I mean, I think it's always been funky. It's got a funky heart, a funky soul. But it's been richer, it's been better off, it's been more safe. People don't take their children there to the beach anymore. That says a lot. Do you see that, Soledad?
Yeah, my cousin who lives in South Pomona, which is about an hour and a half inland, I asked her if she wanted to come visit for the 4th of July. And her mom said, no, she doesn't want to come. It's too dangerous. And I thought, how sad. My cousin doesn't have a pool. You don't want to come hang out with me, but they're so worried that something could happen.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, let's talk tangible solutions as you see it. How do we turn this around? We're talking about, the second largest city in the United States and a massive economic force for the country. We can't afford to let it continue to decline and slide. What would be, if you were queen, what would you do? What would be, if you could wave the magic wand, what would be the policies that you would implement?
Go ahead, Soledad.
Well, first of all, I would deem COVID to be over, because one of the biggest problems is that with the COVID emergency, we have lapsed so many of our municipal codes. Our homeless problem, it was overwhelming before COVID, but since then it has really metastasized. And so in March 2020, in order to, slow or stop the spread of COVID, our wise city officials took very ill-cited guidance from the CDC, which discouraged breaking up homeless encampments because they wanted people to shelter in place. What happened was that no one really sheltered in place. And so that's why you will see RVs everywhere. There's probably about 60 RVs surrounding maybe a few blocks around me. But until COVID is deemed over, RVs are considered domicile properties, and they're allowed to be on the street so that people can shelter in place. The same too with, we used to have 5611. It's a municipal code that said tents down during the day. So again, with CDC guidance, you could keep your tents up. So COVID has been this great excuse for elected officials to just throw their hands up and say there's nothing they can do. And I think that was really great for them. It absolved them of their responsibility for a while, but it's just gotten overwhelming now. And so unless Gavin Newsom gives up his, emergency powers, there's so many of our laws that we can never enforce.
That's a very interesting one. And what else? So that's the public health side. What else, Jill?
Well, I mean, you guys aren't going to like this very much because you're more libertarian, but I think the feds have to come back into the poverty housing funding world. They're not building affordable housing because it costs too much. It just is crazy. The city of LA tried. They kind of did their best, whatever that might be.
The same in San Francisco too.
It's impossible. It's impossible. And I think the last time we actually saw a surge in truly affordable housing was when the feds had a little bit of in the game, and they don't anymore. And I don't know how to fix. I don't think you can fix that on the natural market. I don't think you can have poor people working in cities who we can house. I don't think it's possible anymore.
Mm-hmm. And what about mental health funding? I've not heard that yet. And I typically hear that in regard to trying to solve homelessness. What would you do in that regard?
Yeah, I just want to Soledad, maybe you can talk a little bit about your experience at the LA County Jail. She just was at the jail, and not for anything she did, but
oh, I got to hear this. Go for it, Soledad.
Well, I took a tour of LA County Jail, and there's this huge movement now to defund the jails, to move towards de-incarceration and fund these what are they called? These little communities of social justice. So anyways, I decided I wanted to go take a look and see who was in jail, because the left is obsessed with this idea that you're going to find someone from Les Miserables, Jean Valjean, who stole a loaf of bread to feed his sister's baby, and that's why he's in jail. And I went, that's so far from the truth. What you see there is that we have some very violent criminals there today. And with this whole movement, it's Measure J, it's LA County Measure, they are moving forward to close down the jails. But what's so interesting there is that without any kind of real, mental health institutions that we're talking about, the people who really take care of the mentally ill, LA's Men's Central Jail has become the largest de facto mental institution in the entire world, where there are about 4,000 people who are so violent and mentally ill that they will actually eat someone. They throw feces at the wall, they eat feces. This would just be a disaster to let people out on the street. But what you see there is that it's almost the criminalization of the mentally ill. These people are highly vulnerable. They're suffering from, awful diseases such as schizophrenia, and they end up in the jails because LA County is unwilling to offer real solutions. And it's very tragic.
Well, and dystopian. I mean, this is a scene out of a bad Batman movie.
I mean, imagine when they close the mental institutions and let the people out. That is literally from a Batman movie.
Yeah. All the jail cells make a big click and everybody steps out into the aisle.
Right. And the next thing you know, the city is being held hostage.
But I'm going to go back to what I was, because I think this is the critical thing to look at. Okay, we all acknowledge these problems. I mean, I drive into LA and places I used to go to are almost uninhabitable. Yet the election results show a shift to the left, probable victory for Karen Bass as mayor. I don't see much progress in getting rid of the district attorney. I mean, in some ways, LA is actually even more, out in the ether than San Francisco is, which is quite an accomplishment. So I keep going back to, is there any way of turning it around politically? We did have a lot of progress when Reardon was mayor. Is this something possible, or, has LA's day come and gone?
I think it's almost like a really complicated multi-level chess game. One level that I would go after if I were the god of City Hall is that I would triple the size of the city council, because what you have are 15 incredibly powerful people who represent more individuals than any other state, any other city in the United States. I think they represent each about 265,000 people. And so you can't access them, and you can't get a meeting with them, and you can't talk to them in a normal situation. They're not at the level, they're way above what a city council member should be. And that's one of the big problems. But there's other problems, but they have, there's too much. I mean, I remember when I was at the LA Weekly, we had this fantastic cover story about the individual council members, and we did profiles of each one of them. And we had them, it was a cartoon with all of them, and they were all wearing ermine and crowns and huge jewels and everything, because that's who they get to be unless they really push against it. Once you get in there, you have so much power. And of course, we have all those corruption cases coming out of City Hall, which is a side, product of all of that. So I think that it's a badly organized, just at its very fundamental level. Just the size alone is stupid, and it should have been done away with long ago. But everybody groans when you say, let's have way more city council members. It sounds completely wrong, right?
Well, and I wonder,
what's funny? I've thought about that too, because in New York they have 51 council members,
and their council's as crazy as ours.
Here's where the real problem is, and I really want to bring it back. This is a failure of Mayor Eric Garcetti. So we have 15 city council members. They act as demi-mayors. They get to direct policy and policing in their own districts. And it's really Mayor Garcetti who's been missing in action it's been a couple years now after his failed presidential career. And he's really left a vacuum that has been filled by anarchy and lawlessness. So his legacy will really be one of inaction and incompetence. And that's what's led us to these blighted third world living conditions. So how fitting that even if he gets his ambassadorship to India, he's someone that's really created a modern day cast of untouchables that are the homeless. So it really is a failure of Eric Garcetti. He's probably been one of the worst mayors. I think even former Mayor Villaraigosa, who came to visit recently, said that Rome is burning. So that's a little shocking that he sees that too. But I think with a strong mayor, we wouldn't have this. It's just Garcetti's been gone.
yeah, I mean, the question is, how do you define strong? I remember being in New York and living there at the time of the bonfire of the vanities, when he who shall not be named, Giuliani, came in and tried to clean up the mess. And, there were some rather strident measures that he implemented, and it worked. The city kind of pulled itself out of its downward spiral, but at a cost. And I just wonder, I mean, is this just an inevitable, point of history, Joel, that, history repeats itself in these ways and we go through these cycles? Or is there a chance that we could actually do it differently here this time around?
Well, let's really get to the key question here, which is there any chance that Rick Caruso can make it and turn the city around? I mean, I know that's what Caruso talk seems to be, but just as we, sort of wrap this up, I'd really like to get your views on, does Caruso have a chance? He's the business community, a lot of it is very much behind him, but a lot of the big money is behind Bass. But the bottom line is that, are we in a situation where the city of LA could do another Reardon, a Giuliani, a Bloomberg? There have been a lot of reform mayors, Ed Rendell.
Somebody who's viewed as being able to get it done, as opposed
exactly
to talking about it, right?
And Rick, he's got the mental equipment and the personality to do it, but the results of the first round were not encouraging. I mean, he's in the runoff, but he's behind. So anyway, I'll leave it up to both of you are closer to it than I am. So I would really like to get your views.
I don't know him well enough to peg him. I don't know how he would be, and I don't know her either. I have a sense of gauze. There's gauze over them, and I can't figure out who they are. That's how I kind of feel about the two mayoral candidates. I don't think we in the media got into very much depth in explaining who they were, and that's partly because the newsrooms are all way smaller now. But I don't think the voters have a good sense. I certainly don't. What about you, Soledad?
One of the largest challenges to any incoming mayor is going to be dealing with this new progressive party that's elected, the Democratic Socialists of America. So 2 years ago, the DSA-LA endorsed and backed Nithya Raman, who beat out the incumbent. And when you look at the primaries, Eunice Hernandez, she's also a DSA member. She beat out, incumbent Gil Cedillo. So now the next mayor of LA is going to deal with two progressives who do not believe in private property, ownership of private property. They believe in a collectivist ownership of property, which means more government control, and they are for defunding the police. So who is going to stand up to them? I think it's going to take someone who's willing to be the bad guy, someone willing to push and fight for solutions. So, in a sense, it's just, that's really going to be the incoming challenge of a mayor.
Jill?
Well, it's going to be a fascinating situation. And, Jill, I think your comment about the media really not having gotten into depth on who the different candidates are and what they stand for is probably accurate. Although my sense is that we also have a very disconnected electorate that is just more focused on their TikTok followers than they are on really understanding what's going on. Is this something that you think is kind of a new situation, or has it always been like that in La La Land, LA?
You mean with the media?
The turnout.
Oh, the turnout. I don't remember. I don't remember what it was like. I mean, there was a big turnout in my memory when Reardon ran, and that was a big drama when he won. Villaraigosa, there was a big turnout, as I recall. People are part of it's COVID, but people feel very disconnected, right? And so they don't give a damn who the mayor is. I think that's the bottom line right now. People just don't give a damn who the mayor is.
Yeah, well, the turnout numbers were very low. Soledad, you're in touch with a lot of the Hispanic population has a historically low turnout. Anything changing there? Is there any potential for change coming from that community? Because it doesn't look to me like the other communities are going to change that much.
What they would need is real, in-person, action and just connecting. Because when you think about it, who won the primaries? It's the Democratic Socialists of America. They had a slate of 9 candidates. One of their candidates, Eunice Hernandez, she won outright. She beat out an incumbent. The other 4 are leading in the primary. People like Kenneth Mejia, he's leading by about 10%. So they're the ones that did it. And what's so unique about them is, all of us have today, we think about it as this wholesale mentality where you have to buy slates and advertising. What they did was unique. They did a real ground game. It was a real bottom-up movement, very grassroots, and that's how they got people out. So if any candidate wants to win, they need to go back to old school tactics where you have to go meet people. You have to walk precincts. You have to go knock door to door. I think that's really what is going to get people out these days.
Right. So you may not have the large reach of advertising, but at least you have impact with your message by getting people activated through a face-to-face touch.
Well, that's an interesting idea, because if you have a really low turnout, which we did, it's easier to get to shake hands with people. You only have to get to a few thousand people instead of tens of thousands of people. I mean, that might be the difference, that it's a math issue.
Right. So given the low levels of turnout, those tactics can really have, especially large impact.
Well, it seems like it is, as Soledad points out, it does look that way.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing is that, okay, with turnout, I think we agree that that's really going to be the determinant of, but it seems to me that the Democrats in California, particularly in LA, have developed this ballot harvesting system, which our listeners who mostly are not in California, maybe we could explain what that's about, because I cover these elections and I have a result on election day, and then 2 days later, the result has been shifted by 8 to 10 points. Soledad, could you explain what ballot harvesting is as best you can?
So ballot harvesting is legal in California. It means that somebody can go out on your behalf, collect your ballot and get your signature, and they're authorized to turn it in. A lot of times it's people who really want to help out, maybe the elderly who need help reading, but this is really how things work, where the people going out there in the community, helping people fill out their ballots. So this is completely legal in California. And it's really the game that people need to play these days. Also with ballots, because now we've moved to all vote by mail. And legally, a ballot can arrive up to, I think it's 7 days past the election. So we're looking now at we're looking at election months instead of election days now, where it takes so long to certify any election. But that's really it. It is really now, it doesn't matter who your candidate is necessarily. It's just who can go collect the ballots.
Right.
So if you have organizations on the ground, you have the advantage.
Yeah, and in most states, the delivery of ballots ends on election day. So if you're voted absentee and you haven't turned it in by the end of the election day, it doesn't count. Here, it does count, and that's the difference up until 7 days afterwards, right?
They're not done counting right now. They're not done in LA County. They're still counting.
It's been 3 weeks now.
Yeah, it's dribble. And that, I think what Soledad is mentioning is important. The ground game people had a really good, smart push toward the very end of getting people to send in their ballots at the very last chance. And that swelled up a lot of votes that nobody really saw coming.
And we've seen this in numerous elections in recent years. It drives old journalists like me crazy, because we used to be able to sit around and when the results were in, they were in, and then you could write about them. But now I can write about like this one won, and then when the ballots are harvested, it turned out that they lost.
Plus it dribbles in, so it's really boring. It's like you never feel like anything is happening. It just keeps going on and on and on. It's not an election anymore. It's like super duper election. It just won't stop. It's like people are it's gonna drive people away from voting because they want to be a part of something and they're not. They're a part of this dribble drabble. You're gonna see a lot of people stop voting. The whole point was to get more people to vote.
Right.
And you know what? I've always been very distrustful of the government myself, but now I'm talking to my neighbors who just think there's huge fraud going on. And that's very bad. That's very bad for integrity of cities, that so many people believe this. They feel like their vote doesn't count anymore.
Well, and if that level of cynicism pervades LA politics, I mean, it kind of pervades other areas as well. I mean, we've seen this whole distrust of the electoral system, the perpetuation of, myths about fraudulent behavior in other states. I mean, I think that it's tapping into a feeling that people have nationally that government is just not really, the process is just not trustworthy.
Yeah.
So,
So
Joel, do you have a final, as I look at the time, we're reaching our endpoint. Do you have a final?
I would just like to ask you, if LA is to turn around, what do you consider to be the number one thing that needs to be done? Both of you are in touch with lots of people, and you both have been observing the city for a long time. So what would be the one thing that you think we should be doing?
I would say we need to enforce our laws. We have laws in our books and we're unable to use them. LAPD, they keep saying their hands are tied due to Gascon. Their hands are tied. They can't do anything. Well, let's untie them. Let's enforce our laws, just our municipal laws. Let's get COVID wrapped up so that we can start. I mean, the RVs that are outside, they have been here since March 2020. That's how long they've been there. And we're talking, we talk about broken windows theory. What about burnt out RV theory? In Venice, we like to say that this is actually looking like Venezuela, where we have burnt out RVs that sit on the street for 2 weeks after catching fire. That's what we're dealing with here. It's literally blighted third world conditions, and it's unacceptable. We don't need to live like this.
That's a great one. Jill?
A year ago, I would have had 2 or 3 really strong opinions on what to do. Here's what we should do. And now I feel like a jellyfish. I'm just floating along. I look around, I think, God, what are we going to do? I actually stop now at what are we going to do? And I used to say, oh, well, let's do X, Y, and Z. And now I'm not thinking in those terms. I'm like, I hope I'm not giving up. I mean, I just am like, everybody's so frustrated, and I don't want to pretend I have an idea. I don't have an idea right now.
And that's one of the leading journalists in the city. So you can imagine what shape we're in.
Well, and I'd just like to thank both Jill and Soledad for joining us today. It occurs to me that whether you're feeling like you're floating and there's not much you can do about it, or if you're feeling angry and you feel as though let's get the laws on the books enforced, in either event, if we continue down the path that we're continuing, we're going to be leading the feudal future that Joel was writing about. So thank you so much for joining us, and this has been a great episode.
Great. Thanks.